Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto.
Welcome to episode 1232 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Season 4 of Yes, We Are Open, the award-winning podcast from Moneris, Electronic Products Recycling Association. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Moment Lab, brand marketing and strategy, PR, advertising, and production. You need The Moment Lab. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, making his quarterly appearance, is the Toronto Star's Edward Keenan.
Hey.
Welcome back, Ed.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back.
I think I'm gonna.
It's not much has happened since the last time we were here. So
I tweeted that joke. So we decided, I guess, in early January, you came over and I said, "Hey, Ed, would you mind coming over every quarter and we can just catch up on what's going on the past 3 months?" And you said, "Yeah, like I would do it. I would do it for the lasagna from Palma Pasta."
Absolutely.
Anyway, would you have ever imagined that? So you were here early January. Now we're speaking early April. Everything's changed.
Well, we had just finished back then, if people can turn their mind back to early January, we had just finished a really sleepy election. And the new, crushing inevitability of strong Mayor John Tory was setting in. And now we're on the cusp of a much more exciting election, it seems.
Well, we're going to get into it. There's lots to discuss here because you're right. That was like one of those deals where it's like, you know who's going to win this election. You know it's not going to be close. And, as much as we try to make it like at least a two-person race, like I wasn't buying it. Like there was no race. But now it's like, I don't know. We'll have to talk about it. I don't know who's going to win this election. There's so many candidates who could become victorious here. We have to talk about it. But I need to ask you, am I going to have you on Toronto Mic'd again tonight? Like, am I going to have a double header?
Because it's possible. Because I think we're both going to this AM 640 thing.
I am scheduled to record live from the GLB Brew Pub at Jarvis and Queens Quay tonight for an event. Yeah, it's an AM 640 event. And I'm going to be set up there recording with people who have something to do with the radio station, be it FOTM Greg Brady or FOTM Kelly Cotrera, FOTM Danny Stover, FOTM Alex Pearson.
Holy, it's a
FOTM
FOTM extravaganza.
And then please tell me this, Ed Keenan, what do you have to do with AM 640? Do you have a relationship with that station?
I have resumed my relationship with that station as a fill-in host on their roster. So I recently was in for just over a week for Alex Pearson. Which, is kind of a seamless transition for listeners. Alex Pearson to me.
That's a joke.
Because we're yeah. If I guess you have to be familiar with both of us to get the joke. But it's funny because Alex Pearson was away, and the week she was off on vacation, the whole sort of Chinese interference thing with Handong and all of that just blew right up. And it was like, I wasn't sure if she would be relieved because otherwise her bits of her brain would be all over the studio just from how her head explodes with this stuff, or if she was like so upset that her big story, a Trudeau scandal is like
That's
Christmas
like her,
for Alex Pearson.
Her fantasy is a Trudeau scandal.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I was a regular sort of fill-in voice on that station before I left for Washington, D.C., and Amanda, the program director there, gave me a call recently
FOTM
and
Amanda
said,
Cupido.
while I was down there, and that's right. While I was down there in the States, and after I came back, Brady was booking me a lot to just do some interviews and stuff. So Amanda said, "Hey," and I'm so happy to be doing it because, I think I have the job that I'm ideally suited to do at the Toronto Star as a city columnist. But I love doing radio. I love talk radio just as a format. It's so fun and fascinating to do. So yeah.
So you've been invited.
And then I also got invited to a party because of that.
Right. So you and I were basically invited to the same party. And it just so happens that it's going to be at GLB Brew Pub. And it just so happens Great Lakes Brewery is a proud sponsor of this very podcast. And that's why there is fresh craft beer on the table here at Keenan.
There you go. That's the stuff. Now, what you don't have here, I imagine.
No, I
I'm just checking the
tell me.
selection is the beer they're launching tonight.
No, I
which
do not.
is a 640 Toronto special brewery, which while I was there a couple weeks ago, they announced, I think, in the newscast right before my show. Actually, it was on Greg Brady's show right before I went on, that it was going to be called Breaking Brews. So that's what they're doing there tonight.
Is that what we're drinking tonight? Like, is that the...
That's I think they're going to be debuting it tonight, and people in attendance, of which a few listeners had won a contest. If for all this hype we're doing, if you're listening to this and it still hasn't started yet, you can't get in if you come down.
Is that right?
It's a
Actually, I
private
didn't know
party.
that rule. I've invited several friends.
It's a private
People
party.
wanna
Some
come get
listeners
selfies
won
with me.
tickets.
I'm selling selfies
They have
for-
like staff and clients, and then of course the Toronto
Okay.
Mike live broadcast.
So
there.
I'm live there, and I really am going to have all these different voices on the show, a lot of FOTMs, hopefully some new blood there. But it was kind of exciting for me to realize that you, Ed Keenan, are going to be there. So this is episode 1232. So I'm going to drop this before I bike to Jarvis and Queens Quay with my gear to set up for tonight's 640 recording. So it's possible you hear Ed Keenan. I'm hoping you jump on just at least to say hi. Long time no see for 1233. And I will drink this Breaking Brews beverage and I will review it on episode 1233.
The live unboxing of the Breaking Brews,
Right.
like a sip by sip tasting notes.
So what a day. Now, there's so much ground I want to cover with you, and we have to get to this mayor thing because apparently something went down with John Tory. Those 4 words are still haunting me. John Tory sex scandal. Like, they just don't seem like they belong together. But all that happened since you were here. So hold on, we're going to get to it. But I had a memory of something that would happen when I was in primary school. And I went to primary school in Toronto, and we would have this event every year. And I remember it so well, and I was thinking about it, and I need to ask for your recollections about it. Do you remember Edward Keenan, I got to say this properly.
Inner City Angels.
The Inner City Angels balloon race.
It's as my butting in there indicates, I do remember it, and at one point actually I worked for the Inner City Angels balloon race. I write about this in my book, Some Great Idea, briefly. For me, at that age, in elementary school, it felt like a job because what would happen, we were officially volunteers, but they would give us $2.50 a day plus 2 TTC tickets, child TTC tickets.
Sure.
And the $2.50 a day was to cover lunch. And so 2 friends from school and I went there, and their office, I guess, or their facility was in the little house in behind the Eaton Center, where the church is, the Trinity Church, where the homeless memorial is, and there's a scatting cottage there, which is like a historic house that's been preserved.
I think
so.
They
We
moved
worked
it,
in
but go
there,
ahead.
cutting string, to be tied onto the balloons, and so if people don't remember it, the balloon race was essentially a thing where you would get sponsors or whatnot. You would go and do some fundraising. And depending on how many dollars you raised, I think, or how many people you had donate, you would get a certain number of balloons.
Yes.
And on each balloon, there was a tag at the end of the string, and you would write on it, your name, Eddie Keenan, and your address, or your school's address, would all be pre-printed on there. And And what would happen is that on a certain day, you would gather. All the students in the school would go out to the schoolyard, and you would have thousands of balloons, helium balloons.
Yes.
And everybody would get to hold the ones that they had sent the pledges for, and then you would let them go, and they would go up into the sky and drift off to pollute the waterways and kill small birds and things like that.
Take down a few planes, maybe. Who knows?
And so they no longer do it. But
like looking back though, because it was an exciting day for us kids to be all out there and see all the balloons go up. And then as time would go on, you'd be like, oh, there's a note that came in from, I don't know, Tonawanda. Am I saying the name right? Yeah. This came in. Yeah, look what happened. This guy in Buffalo found your balloon and wrote a little note to say, we found your balloon in the backyard or whatever. And that was exciting. And that look at how far our balloons went. But now, look, I can't believe it happened. Like, it would happen every year. And it just seems really like maybe dangerous or wasteful. It just doesn't seem like it was a great idea to put all these like thousands of balloons in the air at once. I don't know. But we did that.
The reason this may have been jogged into your memory was because recently a school teacher, I think it was a school teacher, sent me an email and said, hey, I noticed you mentioned this. Do you have any more information about the balloon race? And I said, no, I don't. And a quick Google search led me to, I said, Toronto Mike had something about it here on his blog. Maybe you should check that out. And then I also, though, when I was writing about it for my book and I was trying to jog my own memory, the research I did showed me like this great Cleveland balloon race disaster where in Ohio they had a plan. It's like straight out of WKRP's like Turkey Stunt or something, where like the whole town, they're fed up with this nickname, the Mistake by the Lake, and this reputation they have, and they're like, we're gonna do something to get the world's attention. So they set out to break the world record for the most helium balloons all released at one time. So they had, hundreds of thousands or something all downtown, and all these balloons were under a tarp. And the thing is, it became a giant fiasco because there was some kind of weather system moving in, and as they released the balloons, instead of sort of going up and away, they kind of like hovered low in the air under the weather system, and the wind blew a lot of them right into the lake where there was some kind of marine disaster.
And they couldn't tell who was a body in the lake that needed to be rescued and what was a balloon.
Yeah, no, because there was like some kind of shipwreck or a boat capsized, and they couldn't find the people who were floating there with their life jackets.
These balloons were all there, and they're like, oh, there's a kid. No, that's a balloon. Yeah.
And it is remembered as a day of infamy in Cleveland. I mean, when you watch them, if you take out the elements of human tragedy, it is absolutely comical to watch the news videos from it, where it's kind of like everybody was so excited. Like, they're so into it, this giant civic project, and it just did not turn out well.
Okay, so I just Googled Inner City Angels balloon race, and I ended up on TorontoMike.com. Okay, so I'm ranked very highly for these keywords because I've written about this.
You got
these memories.
The SEO.
I got the SEO, and somebody Googled it and then wrote me a note, which caused me to write about it again. So I'm just going to read a little note that came in. So I actually got this email in 2007. Hi, Mike. Inner City Angels halted the balloon race in 1990. The last race was in 1989, when the city of Toronto made it illegal to do such a silly thing. Yes, it was ill-conceived, but it brought in a few $1 million for artists' visits in inner city schools. Inner City Angels still exists and reaches 10,000 children each year in 100 schools. Our 26 artists deliver some wonderfully innovative programs, working hands-on with kids. This is what we have always been about, not balloon races. I joined the Angels in 1993 and have met many balloon race kids now growing up, including accountants, lawyers, and bank tellers who recall their elementary school days letting balloons off in the skies. I received balloon letters back from the U.S. until about 1995. Today, our fundraising comes from smaller events, corporations, governments, and individuals who remember the balloon race days. Cheers. Jane Howard Baker, Executive Director, Inner City Angels.
I love the general worthwhile point that Jane Howard Baker is making in that email to you, or that TorontoMike.com blog comment.
Yes.
But I also love that bank tellers is an example of like some former balloon releasees have gone on to prestigious jobs, such as,
and some are podcasters.
there you go, and overrated writers for the Toronto Star.
Underrated, if you ask me. Okay, I believe Scatting Cabin is now at the CNE grounds. Like they moved it.
It's different.
Oh, different Scatting.
Bidding. Yeah, it's the same guy, Henry Scatting, I think, or the same family.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up. Maybe it's not Scatting. Maybe I'm getting my
because
my
Scatting
names.
Cabin is the oldest like home in the city, and it's at the CNE grounds.
Yeah,
because I've
but
gone and
this
taken
is,
pictures of it.
In behind the CN Tower, or the blah 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 blah.
Yeah, where the church
No,
is.
Scatting Court is a community center, so I'm almost for sure getting this mixed up. And so there is a house back there named after like one of the first bishops of Toronto, where he lived, and it's still in the same place. And actually, it was going to be leveled when the original plan for the Eaton Center, like the Eaton's expansion there, came out, and there was one of those periodic like civic movements to save something, and so as a result, it's kind of like hidden and buried away. But if you go out that door of the Eaton Center, that little courtyard with the church and the house and the labyrinth does feel like a kind of a respite in the heart of the city. It's kind of like there's a secret place.
It's a cool spot.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Okay, let's get to it. People are like, okay, these guys are already a half an hour deep here. Not really. We're only about 17 minutes deep. But what the hell happened? So the Toronto Star broke this story. And I know that because there's an episode of Toronto Mike with David Ryder the morning after the story broke. And that was a very popular episode. It might almost be as popular as this one. But give us tell us like what went down with John Tory sex scandal and how we got to where we are, and then we'll just like unravel this.
Well,
thing.
I mean, you got the inside scoop there from David Ryder, who did there was like a lot of things at the Toronto Star, that story was a team effort, but it certainly, the heavy lifting was done by David Ryder. He was the sort of primary reporter on it. He was getting the tips and investigating them thoroughly. And the rest of the team sort of started pitching in when we had enough to go on to like call different people and start trying to check it. But I mean, it's unclear to me. This is like certainly a personal life scandal. The original lead of a column I was going to write when it came out was something like what you just said, John Tory sex scandal. Like, who would have thought that? Like, these words don't belong in the same sentence. It's unclear to me, even still, as a journalist who's, concerned a little bit, at least with accuracy, how much sex is involved or whatnot. But the scandal certainly is that he had a relationship that he has acknowledged with a member of his staff, a mayor's office staff, while she was a member of his mayor's office staff. That relationship persisted after she left his staff. But, a lot of, as I think probably Ryder probably explained to you, like a lot of his work was trying to find out enough details about the relationship to know if it was obviously improper or if we should conclude that it was likely improper. And, that, like, when did the relationship start? What was the nature of it? Was it affecting the workplace business? And all of that. And basically, when we got to the point where we were ready to publish, because we started to understand, that at least he was in a relationship with a subordinate while being the mayor of Toronto, the chief executive of the city.
There's a power imbalance there.
Yeah, and that in today's climate, that's considered by many people to be de facto improper. I mean, it's certainly disputed territory, whether that constitutes some kind of harassment or not. But it's certainly the kind of thing that And so, as soon as we were getting there, he acknowledged the whole thing and resigned immediately. Like an hour after the Star story was published, he held his press conference to say, "I'm out of here." And then he hung around for a bit, like 2 weeks,
Right.
to make sure his budget got passed. And then he was out of there, and he has essentially disappeared from the public eye entirely since then. And what's happened is like, there was going to be basically everybody who would have thought they were going to run for mayor at some point. Thought they had another 4 years. Like, they've been keeping their powder dry for a long time. And since they thought this was going to be his last turn, a lot of them were starting to sort of make the calls and do the background work that you do when you're thinking about running for mayor. And instead of 4 years, they have like 3 months, right?
Right, because we're going to the polls in June.
And as a result of that, too, though, I think like the sense that anybody could win this thing is out there. And because of that, everybody who's ever thought in a passing glance that maybe they would be mayor one day has decided, like, well, this could be my shot. Like, so they're all singing Hamilton to themselves. They're not throwing it away. They're getting their name in. And so we have like legitimately, I think, 12 or 13, let's say a baker's dozen of high-profile enough candidates that they can't be dismissed as fringe candidates. Like, we will probably have well over 50 candidates, possibly as many as 100 total. But that's often the case, like even when in the last
Ben
election,
Kerr would always
there were
run, for
dozens and
example.
dozens, right? But, of people who have a high enough profile in the public eye to be considered actually like candidates who might have at least a puncher's chance, I think there's probably 13.
Okay, I actually want to talk about these 13 people, but we need to kind of resolve that whole John Tory thing for a minute here. Okay, So when this broke, so again, the Toronto Star publishes this. I'm going to estimate the times, but maybe, I don't know, like Friday, Friday evening. It feels like maybe Friday, let's say it was like 6 maybe. Am I close there? 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Friday. And then I think or maybe at even 7 p.m. maybe, but it breaks.
And then I think he had his press conference at 8:30 p.m.
Right. So like a couple hours later, he announces he had an inappropriate relationship with a City Hall staffer and he's going to resign as mayor of Toronto. So how, and maybe tell us if you knew before the press conference, because David Ryder said they were tipped off he was going to resign in his press conference. But what was your reaction when you learned he was resigning? Were you surprised?
A little bit. I was surprised at how quickly it happened. Let's say that. I thought there were several ways it could go. And, David Ryder started to hear tips that he might be considering resigning. And then by the time he had announced his press conference, he was hearing from people that he was going to resign. Some other reporters at the Star were hearing the same thing. And so I sort of had that advance notice. They shared that information with me because it's hard for me to like step back and say this was my reaction, because what was actually happening is that I was writing and rewriting a column that was going to go as soon as this happened, right? Because it had to be in the next morning's print paper. We wanted it up online. I'm the city columnist, the guy who writes opinion stuff and analysis and context about city issues. So, David Ryder and his bureau colleagues, Ben Spur and Alicia had written, the main story. I was watching the press conference and revising an already written column to go with it. But I had I wrote a column saying, who would have thunk this scandal would come, and what does it change about everything we know about John Tory, or thought we knew about John Tory, whose whole brand is like no scandal, no drama,
No story Tory.
And so I had to revise that very quickly to acknowledge that he was actually quitting as a result of it, right? So, but here's the thing, is that I thought even in the lead up to it, and in terms of like how surprised or shocked I was, how quickly that happened was much more surprising to me than that it did happen. Because as I wrote in a later column about whether or not he would reconsider at a time when Doug Ford and others were saying maybe he should reconsider,
right?
It's not that this is a career-ending scandal for any given politician. It's that it's the kind of scandal that goes so against the grain of everything John Tory wants to be known as. He's a guy, almost every politician has this narcissistic need to be liked. But John Tory is a guy who really doesn't like being disliked. He wants even the people who disagree with him to think he's a decent guy, who's in it for the right reasons, who's trying to work with them. Like that's been who he is all along. He's a guy who has taken pride in sort of like having an upright life. and being no story Tory, like that bland works being sort of that he learned at the knee of Bill Davis as a young man, being kind of his political calling card. So you could, somebody like Rob Ford would have been just a footnote, right?
Right.
And for lots of other politicians, it would be like, this is a difficult time for my family. I acknowledge that, we crossed some lines in the office. The young woman and I have still a decent, relationship. And I've talked to her quite a bit about what we could have done differently, what I could have done differently, whether or not, but it's like survivable for most politicians and not career ending. But I think like that involves being willing to stand up potentially for months and potentially for even longer than that while people continue to like throw mud at you and keep bringing it up. And you become known as like, the guy who cheated on his wife with a young girl from The Office, who like every time people reference you, every time your critics are accusing you of something, this becomes brought back up. And so, as I wrote, it's like, it's not a matter of whether a politician who wants to like be involved in a mudslinging contest could come out of this standing up. It's a matter of how much mud is John Tory willing to stand there and have thrown at him and keep smiling and trying to govern in the midst of that. And the answer with John Tory has always been not very much, right?
Now, what about this speculation that by resigning and essentially disappearing, because I haven't heard much about where John Tory's been at the last couple of months, but that ends the digging by reporters at the Toronto Star and other media outlets. Like maybe there's more to this story, but once you resign and disappear, maybe there's less impetus to follow up on those threads.
It definitely makes it less of a pressing emergency, right? Like if you find out that there's a drunk driver behind the wheel of a car with your kids in the back, that is a situation you have to shut everything else down to go and deal with. If you find out that your children were given a ride home yesterday by somebody who it turns out was drunk yesterday, and you take precautions for the future, but it's less of a like stop everything and let me go deal with this. And I think at the Star, our reporters have continued to follow up on the lingering questions they have about this. I think, But some of the times the answers you get are not satisfactory and you keep digging or you don't. But also sometimes the answers you get are not really news, right? And so don't lead to greater reporting. So I think John Tory's conduct as mayor of Toronto, and it will also be still the subject of an integrity commissioner report, which he, before he left, to his credit, I guess, requested that integrity commissioner look into this matter and report on the extent of wrongdoing in it. That report, that integrity commissioner will be able to interview his sort of like staff, former staff, anybody else involved, and give us any information about how concerned we should be, or give us the information for us to judge how concerned we should be that there was something more nefarious going on. But I think like, he doesn't get a jail-free card for that, and I think we'll still be talking about his legacy as mayor. But like, certainly accepting consequences up front does change the nature of the investigation that's going on into you, right?
Well, specifically, I've seen expense reports of city-funded trips to Europe at the beginning of the pandemic. I think it was London, England, if I'm correct. But where the executive assistant to John Tory was part of this travel. So you have what you have. And again,
I just want to be careful because you said the incorrect job title for the person we're talking about.
What is the job title for the
so I don't remember the precise job title.
Not executive assistant.
And the Star chose not to identify her mostly because we don't think she did anything wrong necessarily, right? Like we don't have any reason to suspect she did anything wrong. And so we haven't gone to great lengths to make it impossible to discover who this is, but we don't want Google results for the rest of this person's life this to be the top thing that ever comes up, right?
Well, I'm with
If
you.
we
In
can avoid
fact,
it.
as I told David,
but her job,
I concur. I don't name her either.
Yeah, her job was like booking his trips and planning his travel, right? So she's like the tour director of the office.
So
and
not executive assistant.
She would be somebody who would be on those trips, like by virtue of that being the job, and yet that add a whole element of like, well, if you're dating the person you're going to Europe with,
Right.
on the city's dime, like the city is paying to send both of you there, like, is this doubling as a romantic getaway? Is it like,
and
what's
it does
a business
raise questions,
meeting and what's
right?
not?
Like,
Yeah.
I know that these are the questions you guys are asking, but like the mayor of a city, you typically don't think of the mayor of a city as of going to international events, and maybe you would ask questions, right? Like how much of this is a city funded trip between two people having an inappropriate relationship?
Yeah, I do think those questions do come up, and I think there are a lot of added legitimacy to them in these cases. Our mayors do travel internationally, for conferences, for like research into what best practices are elsewhere, but also like trade missions and things like that. Rob Ford did it. David Miller did it. Like every mayor does
fair
it.
enough. Absolutely, fair enough.
But again, it's like when there's this mixture of business and personal, and especially when it's a secret mixture of business and personal, it raises questions that aren't otherwise there. People always, like certain, especially sort of like in the Toronto Sun or like the talk radio crowd, but like there's always questions about city politicians traveling abroad, right? And how legit it is, right? Because by city budget standards, it's pretty high priced compared to like, photocopy bill or whatever, or like the transit pass they use to get to the zoo.
Right.
And so often the results are like hard to show. Like, oh, we went to a conference on how cities are implementing speed bumps or whatever, and I learned some things that maybe will be useful one day. And it's like, well, that was $25,000 well spent for you and your staff to go or whatever. So there's always those questions, right?
Right.
The question, the thing is that there's a whole added dimension to them when you have this personal relationship involved. Yeah.
Right, because they were hiding a personal relationship that was not disclosed. So now I'm thinking, what about, we talked about this last time you were here, but, we talked about this, and you can confirm this, although I did get this information from another Toronto Star journalist, but John Tory was receiving $100,000 a year from the family trust, the Rogers Family Trust.
Yeah, and that was known, at least reported, before he ran for re-election again. But yeah, so he was a personal friend.
It's so messy because
a personal friend of the late Ted Rogers.
Go ahead, yeah.
And an executive at Rogers. And he says he resigned most of his other jobs when he became mayor of Toronto, but he said like his place on the family trust, advising the family trust on their corporate holdings and all of that, was like a sacred dying wish that like a dying promise he had made to Ted Rogers, and he couldn't turn his back on it. And so he kept that job, and as a result, declared a conflict of interest whenever anything Rogers related, which, given that Rogers is a part owner of the Toronto Maple Leafs and all the properties that Toronto Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment owns, also does business directly with the city, is like one of the largest communications company in the city and one of the largest corporations in the city. There was a lot of items where he's declaring a conflict of interest.
And if I may, as an avid cyclist, Mr. Keenan, if I just may, a letter from Mark Shapiro of the Toronto Blue Jays requesting that active TO not shut down Lakeshore because it was, in Mark Shapiro's opinion, affecting attendance at the Dome for Blue Jay home games on weekends.
Also,
you know what I mean? It's also
Rogers owned, yeah.
If you don't know, Blue Jays and the Dome owned by Rogers.
Name the dome after the guy. So,
and there's a statue outside. We don't have a statue of Joe Carter, but we have a statue of Ted Rogers.
Touch them all, Ted.
Touch them all, Ted.
You'll never buy a bigger team in your life.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so but see, this is just kind of this is about like optics and how murky all the waters get. Now that water was murky before we learned about the inappropriate
but just on
relationship.
that thing though, everybody knew that he was still advising the family trust. It was only later that the Star reported, he was earning $100,000 a year for that. He was being paid this token honorarium of $100,000, which is like half his salary as mayor, right? Like,
Right.
And
It's
a
not
lot
$1.
of people in this city would consider that to be a like really solid full-time salary,
Right.
And yet the thinking with John Tory seemed to be like, well, when you're as rich as I am, that's an insignificant sum
Pocket
anyway.
change.
Like it's like $1 a year man kind of
Right.
thing, right? Like it's symbolic, but it does like raise all these questions. And Chloe Brown, who was a candidate for mayor in the last election, kept bringing it up as like you can't have this like 2 full-time jobs, draw 2 full-time salaries and serve both masters. You have to focus on the job at hand. And so anyhow, I mean, that's something again that goes away.
But the
now,
reason I
guess,
bring it
as
up,
a-
Mr. Keenan, I'm calling you Mr. Keenan now because, you're on the stand here and I'm cross-examining you, of course. But I'm bringing it up because, again, we're not naming this woman that he had the inappropriate relationship with. I agreed with David Ryder in the Toronto Star's thinking. I've never named her. I've never blogged her name, tweeted her name, or said her name on this, and I won't. But in the case where let's say she's removed from City Hall and she's placed in a business that perhaps Rogers has an ownership stake in, like it's all too close for comfort.
Yeah, and that does the part about placing is like a subject of some question. But I mean, certainly her job after she left City Hall was with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and so the question is like, well, was she placed in that job? Did somebody pull some strings to get her that job? Are those strings different? And this comes up in exactly this situation where if you're an office staff member of John Tory's, you expect him to give you a good reference, like any of us who do a good job expect our boss to give us a good reference, and possibly even put in a word for us, like keep his ear to the ground. Like part of the future career-long benefit of working for somebody like John Tory is that he's got one of the most extensive Rolodexes in the city, right? He was like born into the ruling class of this city, has worked for one of the big 5 Bay Street law firms, which his family founded, has worked for the largest communications company, has worked at the provincial government, has worked as a backroom boy in the federal government, has worked at City Hall. It's like whatever you want to do with the rest of your life, your former boss knows people who maybe if he liked you, if he thought your performance was good, he can put a word for you. Again, when you're in a romantic relationship with him, it changes the nature of how that's perceived. Like suddenly you realize we can't be having this relationship and working together, especially if we're moving to some further stage, especially if my marriage is on the rocks, as it may have been. I don't have the insider details of that, but David Ryder has reported this sort of timeline of what we've heard.
There was geographical gaps, at least.
Yeah. John Tory and his wife Barb own both a condo in downtown Toronto and a property in Florida. And she was living through the pandemic in Florida pretty much full time because he was doing, I think the original rationale was that he's bubbling with people at City Hall to try and run the city, right? Like that, we all had our social distancing bubbles where you're allowed to have contact
he
with
was bubbling
10 people
all right.
or whatever. So, Joe Cressy, the people of the emergency management,
Right.
members of his office staff. And it was during that period of sustained distance that this relationship began, we are told. But we also are told that at various points before this became public knowledge, it became family knowledge, that his wife became aware that the relationship was going on, and that there were questions about whether or not this relationship would end, questions about whether or not the marriage could survive. And so, in that context of a relationship where potentially the relationship itself could become more serious or could be ended, maybe the question of like this, we shouldn't be doing this when we're working together becomes more pressing. And then it's like, well, one of us needs to go get another job. And it'd be hard for it to be me. Yes, the question is there. Did he pull strings? Did he do anything
Because there's a
improper?
lot of jobs, Ed, outside of City
I
Hall.
assure you that reporters at the Star, very good reporters at the Star, have pursued those lines of inquiry and have nothing of substance to report. I assume that very good reporters at other media outlets who are in competition with us and trying to scoop us on all these things are also pursuing those same lines of inquiry. And if they uncover something that seems newsworthy or improper, I imagine we'll read about it. But having outlined all those questions and reasons why I think this is a legitimate area of concern, I don't have any reason, nothing I can point to suspect that there's any evidence of actual wrongdoing in that regard, and that may change.
Okay, because outside of City Hall, there's a million stories in the Naked City, Ed. There's a million jobs in this city, and this job is 37.5% of MLSE is owned by Rogers. On that note, advisor, and again, we got to get to this mayoral election that's coming up, but advisor to the Rogers Family Trust, but he was unable to, in his 2-point whatever terms as mayor of Toronto, unable to get Rogers cell service in the subway.
Oh my God, that is such for me, it is a enduring frustration. Like, it's just absolutely absurd. And when you move somewhere else and you get used to being able to just use your phone on the subway, because that's, of course, why would you not be able to?
And you can use your Rogers phone on the subway. Like,
if you go to DC or New York City.
I was in Paris, France, and I was in the subway using my Rogers phone.
If you got your roaming package, you can use it, absolutely. Sure. So, the infrastructure exists in the subway, which was like enough of a, given the way things can tend to work in this city, it was enough of a belated thing by international standards that the infrastructure was actually installed in the subway tunnels to allow cellular service down there. But then the company that had won the contract to do that and administer it is not Rogers, and it is not Bell, and it is not TELUS, which are the three major companies that dominate the cellular service market in Canada and own the cellular networks across the country, right? And they share each other's networks, but they own the rest of the infrastructure. And basically, my understanding is that when the guys who did build it said, okay, here's how you get in, they were like, nah, we're not doing that. If the TTC invites us to install our own infrastructure, we'll do that. But we're not using your stinking network. We're not paying you, but never mind not paying you. We're just like, we're not enabling service in the subway. And so those big companies are the reason you cannot use their products in the subway, because they refuse. And there are, I think, from what I understand, sort of tenuous, but possibly like there's something to them, arguments where they say, oh, it's not a good enough network and all of that. We would put in something better and all of that. But the point is that, like, technologically, there is no hurdle to overcome here. The infrastructure already exists and is already installed there, and somebody just has to flip a switch. And the people who own Rogers and Bell are refusing to allow that switch to be flipped. Now, one of the mayoral candidates, multiple mayoral candidates are promising to solve this issue because it has become front of mind as a safety issue.
It's a safety issue.
Like, this poor kid, Gabriel, got stabbed to death in the subway, and I was writing about that, and for reasons I wrote about, like, I was more heartbroken than usual. Like, initially thought he was a classmate of my son's. When I heard the news through families in the neighborhood, I learned that he's basically a former classmate of a lot of classmates of my son's, but he went to a different school. But he was a neighborhood kid in our area. He's the same age as my son. He was in the same grade as my son. He was killed at a subway station right close to my house, fairly close to my house, where I have spent a lot of time sitting on that very bench with my own children. And so it was hitting me particularly hard. And the next day, though, I was riding the subway and I saw these posters up about the new, like, app you can use to report safety concerns on the TTC, like, in real time. And it's just, like, so frustrating, the realization that, like, even if I had that app, I could not use it in real time because I have no cellular service down here in the subway. And so it's a safety issue now. And so multiple mayoral candidates are promising to solve it. Anna Bilau is saying basically that she would withhold city business from those companies until they caved on this. I don't know if Freedom Mobile has the bandwidth to take all the city's business or like one of those other smaller companies, but like they're all saying we're going to solve it somehow. But they're solving it involves us believing that they are able to coerce and or entice these big cell companies to play ball. And I don't know what the odds are that's actually going to happen. But it certainly should be an issue. And if these companies are, if public outrage was moved the levers for them, we would see it on a whole lot of other things, right?
Well, when you were here in early January, we were talking about safety on the TTC. This was a big hot button, and it feels like it's only got worse since then.
Yeah, it hasn't gone away as a pressing concern. And I'm like, I've done a lot of thinking about it and some writing about it. And I mean, I do think it's worth us taking a step back to say, like, there are 2 million rides a day on the TTC, more or less. And there have been 4 murders on TTC property over the last year. That's not great. But it's not like a war zone where you're going to be caught in the crossfire every day on your commute to work. It's still rare compared to a lot of other situations and a lot of other risks to your life. But it is the number of violent incidents, not just deaths, but violent incidents, has gone up legitimately over the past couple of years, and it is a level of that I don't think any of us are comfortable with. And I think it combines in most of our minds or in most of our impressions, and I think we may have talked about this last time, with like the presence of homeless people sleeping there, with disarray, with service problems, to lead to an element where it doesn't feel safe and it doesn't feel stable. It doesn't feel maintained. And so that's going to continue to be an issue. It may well be an issue that helps define this mayoral campaign. And I think like the big solutions are like multi-pronged and a little bit complex, but I think they're there. Like there are ways to make this better.
Okay, Ed, we're going to pause right there because we're about to, I feel like we're warmed up now. I'm going to open things up with a question from a listener named Leslie that's going to introduce this new mayoral election that we didn't see coming when you were here in early January. You're like, oh, we got some time here. So obviously, FOTMs drink Great Lakes beer. You and I are going to be hanging out at the GLB Brew Pub tonight. So shout out to Great Lakes beer. Lasagna in my freezer for you, Mr. Keenan, courtesy of Palma Pasta. Did you eat the last one?
I did, yeah.
Okay, just making sure. I don't want them to pile up in the freezer.
Don't worry. The lasagna does not go uneaten in my house. Like the lifespan of a lasagna once it crosses the threshold of my home is measured in minutes, not days. No,
love to hear it. So you got a new one. I got another one in my freezer for you. You're leaving with another
excellent
meat lasagna from Palma Pasta. Go to palmapasta.com. Ed, did I give you a measuring tape last time?
I did. You did.
I did.
You did. And
okay, I got to get you something else.
Courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home, and it's a very useful measuring tape because it's like a seamstress's measuring tape or whatever, the flexi ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm giving you is this time I'm giving you a flashlight. Like we almost lost power. I had a flicker yesterday during the rainstorm. I was going to be reaching for my Ridley Funeral Home flashlight. This is yours. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. Ed, enjoy responsibly.
Look at that.
And I'm not just warming up myself. I got more gifts for you, okay? You didn't get this last time, okay? Moneris. You've heard of Moneris? They got a big office at Islington and
That's
Bloor.
right.
Moneris has a podcast called Yes, We Are Open, and it is an award-winning podcast, unlike this one, Ed Keenan. I don't win awards for this podcast, but Al Grego has won awards for Yes, We Are Open. Their 4th season is available. It's dropping right now. He has inspiring conversations with small business owners across this fine country. I mean, I'm a small business owner, the smallest of businesses. It's me, myself, and I over here, and I listen to Yes, We Are Open, and I'm always inspired by Al and his guests. So go to yesweareopenpodcast.com. What I'm holding in my hand for you, Ed, is a wireless speaker, so you can listen to Yes, We Are Open at home. That's a wireless speaker for you.
Naturally bold.
This
wireless speaker.
Quality speaker. You're going to hear Al's
You need a
dulcet
bold
tones.
speaker to hear the bold talk on podcasts such as yours, and I imagine Moneris's.
Shout out to Moneris, and I want to tell you, Ed, because you're a brand. As far as I'm concerned, there's an Ed Keenan brand. Regardless of what station you're on, the radio, I read you in the newspaper. I want to tell you about a company that can take your brand to the next level, okay? So if you've been struggling to get your message out to the world, if you're looking for a way to increase your brand's visibility and reach your target audience, the Moment Lab specializes in public relations and has a team of experienced professionals who know how to craft stories that resonate with your audience and generate positive media coverage. Whether you're launching a new product, building your reputation, or managing a crisis, they've got you covered. So I will introduce everyone out there interested. I will introduce you to my friends Matt and Jared at the Moment Lab, and you can learn how they can help you achieve your public relations goals. The Moment Lab. Ed, they're there to help you, buddy.
I will keep that in mind.
Hopefully you don't need the crisis
reach
management.
a point where I feel like I require help. Yeah.
Yeah, no crisis management required. Okay, let's talk about... Let me read the question from Leslie, and then we'll get into this. This is an important time. So I should have recorded that opening ramble, but I just wanted you to warm up. Now I'm going to start recording the podcast. You ready, Ed?
Absolutely. So let's kick this off with a question.
Leslie writes, with the crowd of centrist candidates, so centrist is actually in quotes, so with the crowd of centrist candidates for mayor, are we in danger of splitting the vote and electing a right-winger like Mark Saunders? What's our best option if we want to elect a progressive? So that's a big question, but it's going to introduce these 12 potential mayors. I know there's more candidates than that, but the 12 who have like a realistic chance of winning. So we won't count Frank D'Angelo. We won't count some of these fringe candidates who simply will not win this election.
Okay, there's one thing I want to...
Frank can win?
Before we get into that, I think there's a lane open. Right. Now, we talk a lot about how since amalgamation, the city has sort of... gone between left and right? You had like Mel Lastman, the conservative populist. Then you had David Miller, the NDP affiliated, like progressive downtowner. And then you had Rob Ford, the angry populist. And then you have John Tory, who's sort of the center right, but like maybe he's, whatever he is. But it can, and we talk about that conservative liberal split or conservative progressive split, but we don't talk a lot about the like, sane versus nutso bananas split, that where like half of our mayors have been from Cloud Cuckoo Land. Oh yeah. Like Mel Lastman, right. Who, before a trip to Africa would talk about his hosts like dancing around with bones through their nose, roasting them in a cannibal cauldron. Sure. For instance, or things like that. And then of course Rob Ford. Whereas David Miller, whether you liked him or not, was kind of a slick guy, of a polished professional. John Tory, give or take one scandal, a very professional guy.
Liked him or not, he was the opposite of Rob Ford. He was you felt like at least there's an adult in charge.
So if you think that the electorate swings back and forth, then maybe it's time for some BANANAS again.
So is that Frank D'Angelo?
Well,
are you calling
it? Could be. I'm just saying it could be. Okay, so that's it though. The listener's question. Okay. Are we in danger of splitting the vote? Yes.
For sure.
No matter what kind of mayor you want, there's a big danger of splitting the vote. Because we have like a first past the post one round system. There's no runoffs. Thanks to Doug Ford. And so, potentially somebody could win this thing with less than 20% of the vote, and they win the strong mayor like authoritarian, like govern with support of 1/3 of council powers. So, I mean, if you do the math, even if like at 20% of the vote, if the turnout is the same as last time, we could be talking about like a few 100,000 people in a city of 3 million
Right.
are going to elect a virtually all-powerful mayor. So, yeah, vote splits do become a thing.
Yeah, I mean, of course, and that's how Carcetti was voted mayor of Baltimore in The Wire.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, and it like Chicago of all places. So Chicago is famous for having like corrupt politics. Like something like 40% of the governors over the last 20 years have wound up in jail. The mayors of Chicago, like it's famous for Mayor Daley governing like for 20 odd years, and then his son governing for 20 odd years after that, and being sort of pseudo-authoritarian, ward-heeling, like all-controlling bosses of the city. Like that's the rap on Chicago, but that, of all places, they have a runoff system now in place for their elections, and so an unheralded candidate just won in a runoff, because in the first round, the progressive vote was splitting, and in the second round, when it was a mano a mano runoff, he came out and won. They have a better electoral system than we do.
So that's
but
more
we're
of
not
a
gonna
ranked
get
balloting.
that.
We're not getting that here because that makes too much sense.
Yeah.
So we have that first
exactly.
past the post, which is essentially whoever has the biggest number of votes is the winner, regardless of what percentage of the whole we're talking about.
That's right. And so, so you wanted to use this as a way to get into
So
who
here
the
I actually
candidates
want to
are,
get into
and
it. Like,
it's just such a long list where there's
I know,
a danger
but
I'm actually going to forget some of them. But
if
you
I can
go
think
ahead.
of some, I don't remember. So, and I don't. Obviously, we're early here, but the next time we get together will be early July. This will have happened. Like we're going to have a new mayor of this city. So we'll try to roughly keep it. Maybe we'll keep it like biggest name recognition. I don't even know how to do this because there's some bigger names. But maybe we start with the former chief of police. Like so, we talked about.
Okay, so if we're going to talk, like on the right wing of the spectrum of potential candidates.
Okay, let's do it that way. We can do it that way. Sure.
Possibly Mark Saunders is at the starting line, the most high profile or the most likely of those further right candidates. So you got Mark Saunders, the former police chief, who never seemed even a little bit comfortable in public life. I never seen somebody whose job involved giving a lot of speeches who seemed to actively dislike giving those speeches as much as he did. In a city where, maybe people are uncomfortable with the idea of a former police chief being mayor, maybe they're not. Maybe some people think that's what we need. But so there's him. And then alongside him, let's put Anthony Fury, the broadcaster, True North media guy, former opinion editor at the Toronto Sun, who I think is a less of a front runner, but still has a high enough profile and is maybe the only candidates of the ones I intend to get into who's been an active participant sort of in the culture wars, like and so he's there as well. You have a former city councilor, Rob Davis, who I think is a dark horse, like a underrated candidate. He last held elected office in the 1990s, but he was a longtime city councilor and a conservative.
What neck of the woods, like what neighborhood riding, I guess, was he the councilor for? Do you remember?
I believe
because I don't know why I don't remember this name. Maybe in the 90s I had better things to do. Maybe
I wasn't covering city council at that point, but I believe it was the old city of York. I'm just looking it up now while we're
that's Allen Tonksville. I think we call the old city of York. Allen Tonksville.
Well, that's Francis Nunziata's.
Right.
Yeah, he was the first black city councilor in the 200-year history of the city of York.
Okay.
So
that's the other side of the Humber River. Gotcha. Okay. So please continue. Okay, so we got just a recap here.
Okay.
Mark Saunders, Anthony Fury, Rob Davis. These are, you deem these on the right side of the political spectrum.
You can add Giorgio Mammoliti, who at one point, again back stretching into the 1990s, I believe, possibly even the 80s, like in the administration of premiership of Bob Rae, was an NDP member of provincial parliament who then sort of became a centrist populist in the mold of, say, John Nunziata while he was a city councilor, and then during the Rob Ford years became sort of like the thumb, who was Rob Ford's like kind of like enforcer right-hand man, and he is sort of, I guess, a right-wing populist. Now his dedication and devotion to this city's government is demonstrated better, perhaps by nothing, than that months ago he was a candidate for mayor of Wasaga Beach.
And he lost that election, right?
Yes, but he is back, and apparently still owns property in the city of Toronto and is planning to run for mayor here. I also put him into the right-wing side of the spectrum because I think if he has any hope to win, it's going to be as a right-wing populist candidate. Then like, let's say we move to the center. And on the staking out a position on the center right now is Brad Bradford, previously city planner, an avid cyclist who I believe is still an avid cyclist. Housing deregulation advocate and one-time earnest supporter of defunding the police, who has been reborn as the brainchild of conservative meme lords and backroom boys, to sort of be the law and order candidate who still likes to ride his bike, but is otherwise trying to stake out the center right, like John Tory, but faster. He's repeating a lot the slogan, like a strong mayor of action. He's going to be a strong mayor of action to emphasize, because his slogan is kind of like enough talk, it's time for action. But he's one of the candidates, or the candidate, who's most openly saying sort of like, these strong mayor powers that let me just steamroll council, I'm using them, baby. I'm using them because enough talk. Time for somebody. What we've had is mayors who are afraid to just like be fascist. No, I'm kidding. He didn't say that, but like he's really leaning into the like strong mayor powers to like enough talk. Let's get things done. And I think there's a lot of us out there who that resonates with, like the idea of just getting crap done. I think a lot of people, some of whom even were openly admitting it, when they saw the strong mayor powers, were saying like, I don't like what this does to democracy, but somebody has to be able to do something, right?
Get shit done. No, it's unfortunate though that he can't run for mayor of Bradford, because he could be right, Brad Bradford, mayor of Bradford. Those signs would be really cool.
That's right.
And I will say, I feel like the fact that he is an advocate. I had a long conversation with him at the opening of the GLB Brew Pub, where we're going to be tonight, Ed Keenan, and we just talked cycling the whole time. We talked beer and cycling, right? My two favorite topics. And we talked about our different routes we like, and he really does walk the walk, except he's riding the ride. He's not walking the walk, he's riding the ride. And you can get fooled, I think, when you hear somebody is an avid cyclist who actually bikes Toronto's streets. You would think, oh, that's a left-wing pinko. That guy's on the left side. He's a cyclist, but that's an urban legend, everybody. I'm not here to... Even though Don Cherry says it's true.
And so the other thing about Brad Bradford is that he had been appointed, not the official statutory number one deputy mayor, who's Jennifer McKelvey, but he had been appointed one of the ceremonial deputy mayors and by John Tory in this recent term, and his portfolio was supposed to be getting housing built, right? And so the person who used to have that portfolio was Anna Bila, who for 2 terms was sort of John Tory's right hand, one of the ceremonial deputy mayors, but also like the housing portfolio person, like the person supposed to oversee Tory's housing policy. And Anna Bila has never, I'm putting her slightly to the left of Bradford in that center spectrum positioning, where I think like she's never given up her identity where she identifies herself as progressive, but the people who are mostly called progressives on city council don't identify her that way. She still has strong ties to the labor movement, but she, for instance, voted to remove the Jarvis bike lanes and she has Nick Kouvalis, the campaign guy who was behind Rob Ford, and then also on John Tory's team, has been talking on her behalf about how, she's the only hope of saving the city from bike lane pinkos like Brad Bradford. But I think she also is trying to position herself as a centrist who will consider Tory's legacy, but has some progressive cred. And I think, today as we talk, she made an announcement at Ontario Place to try and let's do the Science Center here instead of this spa. So I put her there. Then maybe a little to the left of her in terms of how this opening positioning is going is Mitzi Hunter, the member of provincial parliament from the Liberal Party, former candidate for the leadership of the Liberal Party, who I believe, like John Tory, was the head of Civic Action, the civic organization. I think she succeeded John Tory in that role. She wants to succeed him in another role here. She's from Scarborough. She previously called herself the Subway Champion while running for office there in Scarborough because she was, like everybody else running for office in Scarborough, not allowed to like LRTs. But, she's the one who has been talking again about ranked balloting, which you and I were just talking about, and the electoral system. She has renounced the strong mayor powers. She's just, I feel like as somebody who's primarily concerned with the city, I'm just getting to know her a bit more as a politician. But, in these early days, she wants to be a great centrist uniter, but she's kind of maybe in the weirdo left-right spectrum of Toronto politics, positioning herself just a little more on the progressive side of some of these issues to Bylaw and Bradford.
Quick question, Mr. Keenan. She's an active MPP?
She is. She will have to resign before nominations close. So she's got about a month to resign that position. She has said that she will resign, that she's not planning to leave the race and stay at Queen's Park if the campaign's not going well. I get the sense that at least, that maybe she's done at Queen's Park either way. Like if this mayoral run doesn't work out, which, you wouldn't bet a lot of money on it. Like I wouldn't bet against her, but I wouldn't bet in favor of her. It's like it's just such a crowded, wide open race. But she says she's going to resign, and she has like a few weeks to do that.
Okay, so if you're an MPP, you need to resign to run for mayor, at least at some point, as you said. But if you're a city councillor, like a Brad Bradford, you do not need to resign. You can basically run for mayor, and if you lose, you're just a city councillor.
That's right. Typically, and this is like kind of a loophole that exists because of the by-election, right? There is legislation that says federal members of parliament and sitting MPPs cannot run for municipal office while holding on to their other job. In a typical election, you can't run for mayor and city councilor at the same time. And
right.
So it doesn't come up.
Good point.
There's a by-election on,
right.
Which means, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Right. You're playing with house money.
A get-out-of-the-unemployment line free card for some city council.
But even if he loses, he raises his profile, and he can run again next time. Like, it's one of those things where, to me, it's a no-lose for Brad Bradford.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back around because I just remembered I forgot a high-profile guy on the right wing. So,
okay.
Do you want me to continue to the left and come back?
No, pick up this righty first. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Stephen Holiday, who has confirmed that he's thinking about running, has not confirmed that he will yet. Hasn't registered yet. But he is probably he inherited from his father his Etobicoke seat on city council,
right,
and also his father's parsimony, his dislike for any city spending on anything except vacuuming up the leaves from people's lawns in Etobicoke, which is a boutique city service that existed only for people in Etobicoke and parts of Scarborough at a certain point.
Well, and not all of Etobicoke, right?
No, but there are certain points where there's a lot of...
I don't get it here.
No sidewalks and a lot of lawn, and a lot of trees. Now, When I lived in the suburbs of Washington D.C., I had this service where they had these trucks that just came up. So you still had to rake your leaves.
Rake it to
you rake it out to the curb.
Gotcha.
And then a vacuum truck comes in. And now my house in D.C. had like a forest. It backed onto a ravine, and but even on my front lawn there were like 15 trees, like small ones and big ones.
So this was a lifesaver for you.
Because like once we missed it, and they had already done 2, and I had got them all raked up. But it's like I think I put out like 36 bags, and that was just like the remnants, like the leftovers. So we would have been talking hundreds and hundreds of bags. So I get it, but it's like for a guy who has never seen a dollar spent at City Hall, that he wouldn't call like outright almost corruption. Like it's a weird thing to have as your one worthwhile city service.
So you're putting Stephen Holiday. You're going to put him if he runs. He's between Saunders and Fury.
Yeah. He's like, he has been against like bike lanes, and he often has a openly NIMBY take on. He often says things like that these neighborhoods are mature and they don't need more development, that like we shouldn't be changing the single family home nature of a lot of these neighborhoods. He doesn't like bike lanes. He doesn't like taxes. He doesn't like spending. He's the most economically conservative or economically like conservative member of city council. He shares with the late Rob Ford a penchant for being the only vote on the losing side of an issue, which conveniently allows him to get quoted in the paper as when you do the
lone
pros
dissident.
and cons. But so he's thinking about it, and he would be over there on the right wing of the political spectrum, potentially splitting the vote with those guys or picking up those votes.
Okay, I'm glad you corrected yourself there. So in the center here, we've got Brad Bradford.
Yeah, Anna at the center right.
Bailau.
Yeah.
I said that right? Okay, Mitzi Hunter.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we get to the left-wing pinkos?
Oh, boy. I'm just trying to think because it's possible I am forgetting someone else. There's this Whitby MP who I'm like really unfamiliar with, a federal liberal who just announced she's getting it, a former federal liberal. She was an MP representing Whitby, and she's just entered the race. I think so. Maybe because she's held elected office recently, she needs to be mentioned. But as I say, I was out of the country until very recently, and she's not a known figure at Toronto City Hall. So her name is Caesar. I'm trying to remember.
Did you not know you were coming over here today, Ed? Come on.
Man, there's so much that
lots going on here. Inner city balloon races, and
it's Selena Caesar Chavez.
And I haven't even brought up
she's entered
Ontario Place yet. Okay, so let's get to the left candidates.
You've got Josh Matlow, sitting councillor, who often presented himself as the sort of the leader of opposition against John Tory. Has sort of launched in a fairly high-profile fashion right away, has attracted support from a lot of civic leaders, so like Kathy Crow, the anti-homelessness activist and street nurse, John Sewell, the former mayor and activist and former journalist, Erica M.
FOTM, Erica M.
Yeah, Cadence Weapon. So, both political and cultural figures. So I think he's on the center left. He would identify himself as a progressive. He once ran for the Liberal Party at another level of government, but he does not identify himself as a member of any political party. He is not embraced as a teammate by the NDP people at City Hall, but he often is voting the same way as him and making the same kind of speeches. And at the start of the race, he would have being the highest profile sort of progressive candidate. For a while, it seemed like he might be the only one, other than Gil Penalosa and Chloe Brown, who both ran last time and are running again. And I think both did fairly well last time. Gil Penalosa came second, but you could say almost by default he came second. Chloe Brown placed a distant third, but given how little profile she had at the start of the race and how little money she spent, surprisingly strong third place showing. So they're still running again, but might be like outside chance, like they're in Rob Davis territory if I was setting the odds myself. And then you've got Olivia Chow, who has confirmed she's thinking about it, but has not yet officially entered the race. But all indications I'm hearing are that she is setting up a campaign and preparing to launch.
Wow.
So she, of course, ran for mayor last time. She was a former school board trustee, metro councillor, city councillor in Toronto, then a federal member of parliament, the widow of the late Jack Layton, who was the Bon Jacques leader of the NDP and for a time, very short time, sadly short time, leader of the opposition federally. And she is the stepmother of Mike Layton, who a lot of people thought would be the progressive candidate for mayor this time. But she also, I think, so I think unless Penalosa or Chloe Brown do something to surprise us or to surprise me, and I think jolt Torontonians into the race, which is possible, but I think that sort of progressive lane is a contest between Olivia Chow and Josh Matlow. So there we are. And
it's worth noting, Olivia Chow fairly recently finished third in the mayoral election, right? Because that's right, because John Tory and Doug Ford defeated her that
That's
year.
right. And I think she started that race. So that Rob Ford was running for re-election in the midst of the crack scandal. Like the meltdown following his admission that, yes, he had smoked crack. There was this big police investigation going on. He was going into rehab. He was still running for re-election. And Olivia Chow early on led the polls and was supposed to win. This is like shades of Barbara Hall back in 2003 for anybody with a long enough memory to remember that. But like seemed to almost like, well, this is going to be the inevitable anti-Ford candidate, the pendulum swinging the other way. And through that campaign, Rob Ford, of course, handed off the baton to his brother Doug after he was diagnosed with cancer.
Right.
And John Tory got into the campaign. And I think the ballot box question was kind of a binary, like Ford or not Ford. Do we want more Ford, or do we want to end the Ford show? And then I think there was like a subsidiary contest to that to say who is the not Ford candidate. And I think in the early stages of the race, John Tory beat out Olivia Chow as the consensus not Ford. She still got, you could look it up there, but I think it was between 20 and 30% of the vote.
Well, I remembered very clearly that there was a sense where if you voted for Olivia Chow, because we have this first past the post system, which I despise, Edward Keenan, I felt like, if I vote for Olivia Chow, that might help
Doug
the
Ford,
Fords,
yeah.
right? So you would be, I'll vote for the best chance of defeating the candidate I want the least to win. And too often in this so-called democracy, that's the case. It's like I have to strategically vote against the candidate I want least to win.
And that's actually, interestingly, part of the math people who are supporting Olivia Chow this time are doing going in, is saying in this first past the post system, which maybe hurt us last time and routinely hurts the NDP in federal and provincial elections, maybe if you can win this thing with only 20% of the vote, and Olivia Chow is such a strong NDP-backed candidate, she gets the same 20 to 30% she got last time, that could win this outright. She doesn't need to expand her base beyond that potentially, although, she certainly will try. But that could be a winner here, right? So
fascinating. Okay, I'm just looking at all these names you've dropped, and yeah, it's going to be very interesting how this shakes down. And you must be licking your chops as a guy who gets to cover this and write about this in Canada's largest newspaper, because we just came off a boring AF election, okay, where we all know who is going to win, and we knew it wouldn't be close, and then blah blah blah. Like, what's exciting about that? And here we are, where I'm just looking at these names you dropped. Like, there'll be, even just for the progressive vote or whatever, Josh versus Olivia, and you got your center who's looking to, you got your Mitzi Hunter versus Brad Bradford, and then you got the Anna Bialau, and then you got your right wingers. Mark Saunders is in there, and he's gonna have, oh my God, Mamalides there. And then you have these, we didn't mention them in this part of the discussion, but you have your Frank D'Angelo's, and I don't know who else will be like that. I know there's some names that were on the ballot last time, but ended up getting like only a handful of votes, Blake Acton. There's so fascinating. This is going to be quite the It
is, and I am
election.
looking forward to covering it. I mean, there is the factor of like worrying. Have you ever gone to or watched? Traditionally, there was one debate in every cycle back when we used to have a lot of debates,
right?
Where like all the candidates would get on stage at the same time, and it would be like, oh, there's 48 people running for mayor. Here's all 48 of them, and it's like they get 1 minute each, basically. Right. Like, it's not a debate. It's like they ask a question and then it's like speed round the whole time.
Right, and Ben Kerr would sing a song or something.
Yeah, everybody has 30 seconds to introduce himself, and then we're going to ask 4 questions, and each person's going to have 30 seconds to respond to the question, and then it's done, right? And I worry a little bit about that factor here at the kickoff of this, like in terms of trying to cover it myself or trying to, I mean, there's a team of us at the Star, but in terms of me as a columnist trying to get my head around it, it's like, how much time and attention can I spend looking at any given candidate? And I am in no way excited. So because of the first past the post stuff that we've already talked about, I have a streak of fear running through me in this election about what could happen. And like, even if I like the winner that results from that kind of vote split, I don't like what it, like I want the winner to represent the will of the people of Toronto almost more than I want it to be somebody I agree with, because I think there's fundamentally more important. The democracy
it's more
of the city
legitimate,
is more
right?
important
It's
than
like
my view on any given issue, mostly.
Like,
right?
I'm not going to suggest, like, if let's say you come up the middle or something and you win this thing with, let's say, 19% of the vote. Okay, who knows what the vote? I'm sure it'll be a pretty high vote turnout, because whenever you have these elections where you don't know who's going to win, usually that results in a pretty high vote turnout, I would imagine. But that's my speculation. Okay, so let's say 19%, you've won. It's not illegitimate. Like, that's a democracy in action. That's the rules that
that's
we
the
have.
system. Yeah.
But it's like, that's let me do the math on this. That's that's 81% of Torontonians who voted for someone else. Like, it does seem to
and quite
detract from
possibly
legitimacy.
would have voted for anyone else, right?
And
like,
if you
depending.
If you get breaking news on your phone, will you announce it on this episode of Toronto Mic'd here?
I will, but I need to change the settings on my watch, because I get a lot of like sports breaking news that's actually like somebody hit a home run, or like some member of the Columbus Blue Jackets scored a nice goal, and it's like, why are you alerting me to that on my watch? Like, as if it's
you got to raise the bar for breaking news if it's going to make a noise. Like, to me, it's all about the audio notification. I'll take that as like just a what do you call it? Like a notification that's visual or whatever. But once a noise is made by my phone, like literally, like I have a time of day where
it better be.
Yeah, at this time of day, you actually have to be one of these 6 people to make a noise on my phone, and that includes your children, your mom or whatever.
Right.
Like, my phone, if Ed Keenan calls me at 3 a.m., my phone won't make a sound. Okay, this is by design. So
Okay. So I have that fear, but I'm also excited as a Torontonian for an election campaign in which we actually are going to have the potential to discuss issues in like where the result is not known, where there's a chance that people could put forward ideas for how to do things or what we should do, a vision for the city, and that vision could win, right? That could become fact. If enough people say, hey, that's a good idea, the field is wide open enough that you can win it on the debates. You can win it on your policy. You can win it on your campaign. And it's been a long time since that felt like it was really the case. So as both a writer and as a resident, I'm looking forward to that element with the deep reservation that I don't know. Now, our best hope, and this is your questioner kicked off by asking this,
Leslie.
is that either, in fact, by them, like the field has to narrow at some point, right? And there's two ways that's happened historically, is that midway through the campaign, the halfway point or whatever, somebody looks and say, okay, this is not happening for me, so I'm going to back out and maybe I'll endorse the person that's closest to me, right? Who's doing much better already than me, right? I can put them over the top. And then the field narrows that way. So, you kind of have like almost like primaries here through public opinion.
Yeah, I throw my
support
support behind
race.
Josh Matlow or whatever.
Or historically, that's also happened just like the public makes that choice and narrows the field, even though the names are still on the ballot. There was a point in the 2003 race where Barbara Hall was supposed to be the inevitable mayor. And John Tory and John Nunziata were running against her, and David Miller and Tom Jacobek.
Right.
But basically, Barbara Hall was seen as inevitable. And then it was thought that this backroom boy, corporate guy, John Tory, might stand a chance because the establishment wanted him. He was like the family compact candidate.
Right.
But that John Nunziata was like the other maverick with a shot at it, right? And what wound up happening is that through the campaign, David Miller attracted some attention. He had this Island Airport thing that was, and his broom. He brought in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to attract attention and endorse him, which in retrospect,
he's an anti-vaxxer now, right?
Yeah, and he might primary Joe Biden.
Oh, I heard that. Yeah.
But he's an anti-vaxxer. That's become his big thing. Back then, his big thing was like keeping water clean, which is maybe a nicer thing to be in the eyes of many of us. Like he was the water keeper guy. But basically, by the end of the summer, because the polls showed David Miller surging basically into a dead heat with Barbara Hall and John Tory, I think a lot of people saw that and were like, Barbara Hall was supposed to win. She never closed the deal. She's stalled out, and look at this guy skyrocketing. And if you watch the polls over a 2-week period, it's like she collapsed and David Miller like cruised to victory. Right. And it's because like basically the public decided, oh no, this is the guy. Like if
you got to ride the hot hand.
If you're the center left,
right,
this is the guy, right?
Right.
And so it wound up being almost a 2-horse race between David Miller and John Tory on election day. Wow. And so something like that could happen again, where essentially 3 or 4 candidates maybe emerge as the actual front runners, and people vote based on that. And that so people could withdraw and make that the actual case, or it could just be that like in the public mind, it's like, well, these are the people who got an actual shot. So this is how I'm making up my mind. And I think if you are like your listener there, Leslie, was it?
Leslie.
A progressive who's worried about vote splits, it's like progressives talking amongst themselves and organizing and whatnot need to sort of at a certain point say, oh, this is the horse we're going to ride based on the early performance. And lets everybody get in the bus, right? Or on the horse, or whatever metaphor you want to use. Horseback gets very crowded very quickly.
Right.
But if you're on the right wing too, it's like, is it going to be Holiday? Is it going to be Saunders? Is Bradford actually your right wing guy or not? Like, whatever kind of candidate you like what's going to happen early in this campaign, I predict, and it may not happen exactly like this, but is you're going to see like Olivia Chow and Josh Matlow and Gil Penalosa attacking each other, right? Like you're going to see the centrist candidates, Bilau and Bradford and Mitzi Hunter, like clawing out each other's eyes to try and differentiate each other from each other, right? Because like this person who's jockeying for the same votes as me, that's the threat to me.
Yeah.
And that's my hope to win, is to get this slice of the votes. I think that's really unhealthy, but hopefully after the early round of that, what you see is sort of like a few consensus champions of the polls sort of here, right? Like whether that's conservatives or whether that's progressives or whether it's like a very a specific position on a high-profile issue, like if there's 3 people who all agree on it, and that's the most important issue, like our best hope is that we see that sorting, and if they don't sort themselves, then the voters are going to have to do that. And if the voters don't do it, then you wind up electing somebody or leaving the field open for somebody you hate.
Buckle up, Keenan. It's going to be a hell of a couple of months coming up here. Did you... Yeah, okay. We'll take an intermission here. That's okay.
Just a short intermission.
Take an intermission here. I'll play some music, and we'll be right back with Ed Keenan.
You got a diamond, you got 9 men, got a hat and a bat, and that's not all. You got the bleachers, got 'em from spring till fall. You got a dog and a drink and the umpire's call. What do you want? Let's play ball. Is that a fly ball or is it a seagull coming in from the lake? Just to catch the game, it's the last inning. Our guys are winning. Dave's put down a smoker, a strike, and you got no doubt. What do you want? Let's play ball. Okay, Blue Jays, let's play ball. It's a beautiful evening, fans, at the ballpark. Game starts, warm summer breezes, sun's going down, and it's all dark at the ballpark. That's okay, it's a night game.
Come on, Ed, do it for me now. Okay, Blue Jays, let's play ball. Oh, one more time, Ed. Okay, Blue Jays, let's play ball. Oh, too early. Okay,
Seventh inning stretch here.
Ed, if you have any old tech, like old antiquated technology devices, maybe a smartphone that doesn't work, don't throw it in the garbage, Ed Keenan.
I wouldn't think
never
of it.
do it, because those chemicals end up in the landfill.
But Mike, what should I do with it?
You go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, find out a safe depot near you where you can drop that off, and thank you to EPRA, proud sponsors of Toronto Mike, for just accrediting and ensuring that these places available on recyclemyelectronics.ca are doing the right thing. Here we go, the big hit. Okay, Ed, home stretch here. This election's got me. I mean, holy smokes. What would we have talked about if this...
Well, we might
all held
talk
in
about the
regular-
opening of the Blue Jays season, the start of baseball season. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
We back out their coaching this year. Not for the Blue Jays, but
Not for the,
yeah,
that's
a
that
whole
would be a
different-
mind
yeah.
blow here, right? So where do you coach? Are you allowed to reveal that?
Yeah. I coach one of my daughter's house league teams in the
Okay.
West End of Toronto.
All right.
But
good luck to your daughter.
It's good. So
Yeah, I know. I always love it when we did a great episode. So Keenan, that's funny. Keegan. Those names are similar. Keegan Matheson was here a couple of weeks ago to set us up for the 2023 season, Blue Jay season, and we both left that conversation realizing that we don't need to play the regular season. The Jays have won the World Series.
hold on. You know the other thing we would have talked about. I just want to put this in there.
Okay, because then I have a couple of notes of things I do want to.
Yeah, because you've got actual questions and stuff. But
yeah,
I went as a young man, as a teenager,
Mhm.
to Cardinal Newman High School in Scarborough.
Okay.
There are currently 2 members of the Toronto Maple Leafs who also attended Cardinal Newman High School in
Can
Scarborough.
I guess who?
Yes.
Bunting.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah. And a newly arrived
Okay, help me out here because it's not
Ryan O'Reilly.
Right. Okay,
Who
Ryan
did
O'Reilly.
not? He didn't attend for the full 4 years
But
and
still.
all of that. But he went for a year while he was he
That's
came here to
exciting.
play hockey and then. So yeah, it's like for people who went to my high school, it's just kind of like, hey, Cardinal
Yeah.
Newman's own. There was the one game where O'Reilly got the hat trick and Bunting scored another goal, and it was
Wow.
like something like 60% or 70% of the Leafs goals in that game were scored by alumni of my high school, which is kind of a wicked thing. So.
I don't think the Leafs have had a member from my. The last player who played for my high school team was Drake Barahowski.
Oh
Do you
wow,
remember Drake?
Yeah.
So Drake Barrett, the original Toronto Drake, if we want to get technical about it.
Before we leave this subject, the
Yeah.
one thing is that Ryan O'Reilly, obviously, he came here to play hockey in Toronto. He did not play for Cardinal Newman's hockey team, which I did play for in my days.
Really? What position did you play?
I played right wing.
Okay, well,
Like my place on the political spectrum as well.
I was going to say it, obviously.
But Michael Bunting did play and was a superstar for the Cardinal Newman Knights hockey team because he was like undrafted in the OHL.
Yeah,
until
because
he
the
was an
OHL won't
overager.
let you play in the high school team.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so it's very rare for an NHL player to have played on the high school team, but the coaches, the former teachers of mine and his, who I have been in contact with, are very proud to have coached him, and like it's just a cause for celebration out there on the Scarborough Bluffs. So
Love it. I love it. So Ed, again, you have a new relationship with a new old relationship with AM 640. So what is it? They just call you when somebody's taking vacation or something?
So yeah,
sick?
the branding there has changed
What is the
to
branding?
640 Toronto.
640 Toronto. Okay,
Yeah.
they got rid of the Global News Radio.
It used
They
to be
tried that for a
Global
little
News
bit.
Radio 640
Yeah,
Toronto.
GNR.
So now, and then before that, it was AM 640 was what you would say all the time,
Right.
and now I think it's just 640
640 Toronto. So you're just like a go-to fill-in guy? Are they going to give you your own show? Are these questions I should ask tonight when I have the program director on the mic?
As of now, I am a fill-in guy. Yeah, I mean, I think typically like. Prior to that, I had a relationship with News Talk 1010 where I used to have that Sunday night show. But even after I ended my Sunday night show for a while, I was a filling guy. And it was like people plan vacations. Jim Richards was going on vacation for 2 weeks. They slot me in, etc. Then when I began my relationship with 640, I never had a show there. But I did I filled in for Oakley. I filled in for Kelly Cutrara. I filled in a lot for Alan and during the lunch hours. And so now I think again they're going to have a roster of a few regular fill-in hosts because I think the idea being that if you have the same voices all the time, then listeners become familiar with them. They become personalities of the station. So I'm happy to be in that role.
I think you might have got that position because they cut ties with former MPP and fill-in guy at 640, Peter Sherman.
Before I left,
there might have been a gap.
It was me and Sherman, it seemed like, for a while, and Arlene Bynan. And Bynan is still there. Arlene is still a regular fill-in host.
Will she be there tonight at the GLB Brew Pub?
I am not sure. I have not been. They have not shared, even given how I've outlined my important high-ranking position at the station. They have not shared the guest list with me, so it will be a pleasant surprise if she is there. But yeah, so I mean that's the gist of it, and so it's like so we'll see how it evolves. But the idea is if people are going on vacation or if they're sick, they can call me and see if I'm available. And there's a short list of us who are going to be on that, and they'll be regular listeners, and that's probably the perfect amount for me right now, filling in on vacations and stuff, because I like doing it for a few days or a week at a time. It's still exciting for me. The thing about podcasting, but also radio, live radio, is that it has part of that performance element. You get that energy from it that you get, if you were ever in your school play or whatever.
You can scratch the itch.
I'm also talking about a lot of the same issues and expressing myself on them in my newspaper columns, but it's a different kind of energy because it's like a solitary process, and it's you write a draft, you edit it, you think about it some more, you do it, but then you put it out there too, and then over hours and days people react to it, whereas live radio you've got this live performance aspect where first of all, can we get through it without ruining everything, and second of all, will it be good, but also it's sort of it exists in this moment. It's not days and days of drafting and redrafting or hours and hours and then days and days of fallout from it either. It's it's happening now. We are listeners and broadcasters sharing this moment together, connected through the miracle of auditory technology. And then like one of those flowers that bloom only for one day a year,
Right.
and are so beautiful, and then fade when it's over. Till next time.
1 a.m. Oh, yeah, it's called the 640 Toronto. 640 Toronto host who will not be at the GLB Brew Pub, because I asked specifically about this gentleman. John Oakley will not be there. So there's a name, because John Oakley is just kind of a private guy. Like, he's never been on this show. He's probably the only 640 Toronto host who hasn't been on Toronto Mic'd. So I thought, okay, if he's going to be, I know, I got to get that right. But I need to get it right for tonight anyways. But if he was going to be there, I'd be like, oh, I'll get him on the mic and he can make his debut. But John Oakley apparently not scheduled to make an appearance tonight at the GLB Brew Pub.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame. It's a shame. Okay, before we say goodbye, you've been amazing. There's a lot here to digest. If there's anything on your mind, you can, of course, spit it into these microphones. But can we talk a little bit about Ontario Place? I know we talked about it last time you were here. And I know, of all the issues that are going to be election issues, like, TTC safety and affordable housing, blah, blah, blah. But transit, of course, in addition to safety. But Ontario Place, where are we at exactly? Like, is there anything we can do to stop this?
Let
Talk to
me
me.
give your listeners a preview. This weekend, I will have a column in the Toronto Star alongside a story by my colleague David Ryder about Ontario Place, and basically both of them talking about me making an argument that it should be and could be a defining issue of this electoral campaign. I think, obviously, fear of crime, the budget, like there are other big issues on people's minds, affordability of housing, but I think there's a recipe in Ontario Place that the kind of Island Airport had as this galvanizing issue for David Miller, where it was important in itself.
Okay.
No, it was important in itself, but it also symbolized a bunch of other things, right?
Okay.
And I think, like, the way that Ontario Place is being foisted on us, the way that it's sort of a giveaway of a public asset to a private company, the way that it is just trashing our relationship with the waterfront, but also the way that Ontario Place used to be like owned by us, for dedicated to us, like a good public space for everybody to enjoy, is been left to rot, and most of its attractions shuttered and neglected and shut down, and now the best we can hope for is to give it away to a company who will privatize that space, and we'll never get it back. I mean, I think there's a lot, not just that it's important in itself as a massive piece of land, but I think, like, the things it stands for in a city where a lot of our infrastructure has been left to rot under our feet, where a lot of public assets seem to be given away for pennies on the dollar, where the interference of the premier in city life and city business is an ongoing concern. I think there's a lot here that resonates just beyond that one site too. And so I make the argument that it could be, and perhaps should be, a big issue in this election campaign. Anna Bailau and Josh Matlow both held press conferences today as we speak, outlining their opposition to the plan and how they would change it. Anna Bailau is basically going to ask the premier, let's do Ontario Science Centre instead. Josh Matlow is going to try and play hardball and say that he won't consent to allowing a land swap that's supposed to take place, where the city gives some of its property to the province, vice versa, to enable this to happen. Other candidates will come out wherever they are on it. Mark Saunders, of course, his most recent gig before running for mayor was like a patronage position overseeing this development of Ontario Place. So presumably he's in favor of the provincial plan, thinks it's good. But I think it does have the potential to be an issue that resonates, and part of it is like if voters keep asking about it, think it's important, want to put pressure up. Like, ultimately, this is provincial land, and it's a provincial project, and there's very little the city can do to stop it if Doug Ford is determined to make it happen. But if anything is going to force a reconsideration, it's a public outcry that could be galvanized in an election campaign, that could be like given voice in an election campaign by it becoming a big issue, and a mayor having a mandate to try to call it off. Doug Ford has shown in the past that he will change his mind and cave to public pressure. So, it's
like with the Greenbelt.
It's possible. Initially, sort of, yeah. And then he caved to a different kind of pressure,
right?
In revisiting that, but
I got my good eye on this Ontario Place development, primarily because I absolutely love that space, and I literally visit it maybe 5 days a week. 5 days a week.
It is a dynamite space, and I think the last time we were here, I talked about I went there by myself, and then I was shocked by how nice it was to wander around there, even in its sort of maybe because of its semi-abandoned state, right? And then I went back there with my daughter, and then I do think when you walk around there, whether or not you find the charm of the abandoned rides or whatever as charming as I do, I think to take in the scope of it out there on the water in the forest, and what it is as a public park, what it could be with just a little bit of TLC as a public park, right?
Right.
I think the idea of raising that forest and putting a big glass box in there for a water park. The term people sometimes push back against the luxury spa characterization, but even if it was just all water slides, even if you just called it a theme park, boxing it in and charging admission, and why would you do that there out on the water when you have a beautiful park there? Why?
And they want how many public dollars that would go towards this, and then again, none of it makes sense to me, to be quite honest with you.
The plans call for building an underground parking garage for thousands of cars
2,000
that people are estimating because that land is landfill, right? The land there is basically in the lake, right? It was put there by us. Ontario Base is built on
they moved
landfill.
The water, of course.
Built, those are fake islands.
It was front, not front, but it was Herbert, or what was it? Was way up.
It was Lakeshore Boulevard at the very least was on the lakeshore at the time.
Right.
And so, I've seen estimates, and they're at this point just ballparks based on the typical cost of these things and expected things, not the kind of inflation that you see when you actually get the walls open when you hire your contractor and he says, "Oh, your wiring needs to be replaced." Of $500 million or more for that parking garage that's going to be public money.
Wow. This is a boondoggle. Okay. Ed, you got me all warmed up here. Okay, so next time you're here, we'll have a new mayor, so we'll have a lot to discuss here. This was quite the conversation, from the Inner City Angels balloon race to the mayoral election. I can't wait to see you tonight at the GLB Brew Pub. We'll do another 90 minutes on Ontario Place. We'll do another 90 minutes on Ontario Place in the next episode. But true or false, did you once investigate running for city council yourself, Edward Keenan?
I did. I thought hard about it, and even approached some political figures who were supportive of that idea, and then I realized, first of all, more than anything else, why would I do that to my family? And also, I don't know that I would like that job better than the job I have. And I don't know, and I still don't know, that I would have more influence on city affairs in that job than I do in the job I have now. As a city columnist at the Toronto Star, I think I can influence public policy to the extent I'm comfortable influencing it, and potentially, with the Toronto Star, push hard and get more action on things than any individual city councillor can. So...
Well, I'm glad you're still writing for the Star. I love reading what you write, and I love these quarterly visits. I can't wait till your next one. If you want to make I don't know if you will do this, but would you make a prediction, who wins this mayoral election, so I can pull the clip and play it for you next time you're here, and we can either laugh at you.
We're going to have to record 13 different versions, though.
Smart.
Yeah.
That way I'll make sure you got it wrong. Okay.
Yeah, I honestly would not bet money on it at this point. I think it would just be silly to just make a prediction. That said, probably Matlow. Or Bilao. Or, maybe
Hedging his
Bradford.
bets.
Could be Olivia Chow.
What about Mitzi Hunter?
It could be Mitzi Hunter. I think she's...
I'm feeling Mitzi Hunter at this point. I'm not saying this is who I want to win. I'm just telling you who I'm feeling at this point.
Then again, it could be Saunders.
Wow.
But no, yeah, I mean... like I legitimately, I think all those people we just named have in my eyes like almost an equal shot. So
Stay tuned, everybody. It's going to be a heck of a campaign. I was going to quote, who's the Joe Buck? Is it Joe Buck who said, "See you tomorrow night"? That's like a Joe Buck baseball call, I think. Okay,
Maybe it is.
So Ed, you ready? See you tonight. And that brings us to the end of our
That's the ball game, folks.
That's the ball game. Bring back Vince Scully. Okay. That brings us to the end of our 1,232nd show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Edward Keenan is the Keenan Wire. Follow him on Twitter while they're still at Twitter. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Maneris is at Maneris. Recycle My Electronics are at EPRA_Canada. The Moment Lab are at The Moment Lab. And Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. See you later tonight, live from GLB Brew Pub with Greg Brady, Kelly Catrera, Alex Pearson, Edward Keenan, Danny Stover, Amanda Cupido, and an assortment of others who wander by. Don't you dare miss it. See you then.
And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've been told that there's a sucker born every day. But I wonder who. Yeah, I wonder who. Maybe the one who doesn't realize there's 1,000 shades of gray. 'Cause I know that's true, yes I do. I know it's true, yeah. I know it's true. How about you? Oh, they're picking up trash and they're putting down roads. And they're brokering stocks, the class struggle explodes. And I play this guitar just the best that I can.